Boason, Omofaye, nice to have you.
Thank you very much for bringing me again to
like I asked Mr.
WebTV.
How's the lockdown experience been? Day 9.
Well, the lockdown is still in effect, but again, we need to keep reviewing situations as they go along. There were a bit of unsettling news going around, incidences of thefts. It's beginning to happen. Yesterday I had 1 or 2 incidences of breaking and entry in the local community where I live, here in Lagos. And there were been more discussions I had on the street for some folks' homes being broken into and half bag of rice stolen in poor, low-income community in Lagos. In some areas you find street urchins and others ganging together, setting up their own roadblocks in local areas, extorting almost violently money from people who drive or who walk around, the smoking drugs and high on alcohol. So these are beginning to happen. So I think it is time for us to review situations. Again, I go back, we have a high unemployment on our hands before the COVID-19 lockdown.
An economy dominated by the informal sector too.
Yes,
majorly.
Yes, and we've locked down universities from basic school to the universities. So everybody is at home, one way or the other. What would students be doing? Polytechnics, universities, secondary schools, and what have you. The level at which folks prepared for the lockdown and the expenditure they're making is rising on a daily basis. Some of the provisions they made before the lockdown beginning to get exhausted. So if you take an average man on the street with about 2-3 kids who are in primary or early secondary school or colleges, and the mom is at home, the dad is at home, the kids are at home 24/7 in one room, face me, I face you, living space, then the volume of food and items consumed gets a lot higher. So earlier, you have kids go to school at about 7:30, leaving at 7:30, and maybe come back by 3-4 o'clock. That saves some food items, whatever, in the homes. Now that they are homes, beverages, milk, sugar, rice, whatever, gets consumed a lot faster than before. The appetite of these young ones are very high. And the mom and dad at home doing virtually nothing. So folks are getting a little bit hard-pressed. I won't say at the edge yet, but getting really hard-pressed. And that seems to explain the rise in the number of folks that you see on the streets. Okay? That explains it. That explains it. That folks are getting pushed to the wall gradually. And we need to begin to think very quickly. How are we going to handle this? In particular, from the bad guys who want to take advantage of the situation to start robbing people in broad daylight on the cover of darkness, entering people's homes because they believe you have what it takes in your house and for them to eat or make life go by. This exposes quite a lot about the nature of our economy, the problems we had hitherto on our hands, now compounded by this virus pandemic.
Let me ask you, because the National Assembly has been saying that we need to really see clarity, transparency, and even the real impact of social intervention programs earmarked by this government for the poor. Because this period, it's about ensuring that the vulnerable, like Mr. Bibola said, are protected, that they feel the impact of the interventions. What would you like to see more in terms of metrics or strategies of the people that have been impacted? We see the figures, but National Assembly leadership, some other leaders have come out to say we need to see how this is really impacting them.
This is a little bit difficult to unknot as I read them in the news as a journalist myself, as a business journalist. We have cash. There are multi-layers to this. I think the central bank and the organized private sector or corporate Nigeria seem to have held the top end of it. You have a committee, whatever, and you had billions of naira going into that. So there are measures being taken by a few government agencies to relieve companies and small businesses of the burden. Okay, so that's good. So we're coming down the bottom of the pyramid. We're getting to the bottom now where the social intervention program, money distribution and food distribution will have to be. And this exposes the fact that our governance structure had major fault lines, ab initio. And the first of that is the problem with we don't even know how many we are as a population, as a Federal Republic of Nigeria. Are we 200 million or 220 or 180 or 150? Our address system is very poor. Our postal system is not up to speed. Now, how do you distribute food items or whatever palliatives to people in a way that is measurable and fairly and equitable distributed?
And impactful.
And that is what where impact comes from. Impact comes from the structure that enables you distribute, know who you're distributing to, and all of that. So this shows a lot of the underbelly of how unstructured whatever that we've always had. And the level that's supposed to fix this for us in terms of governance is the local governments.
Yeah.
So if you say Lagos State has 20 local governments, for example, and this is just hypothetical, and you say, okay, whatever, let's just say 20.
20, yeah.
Whatever. 20, and you say we have 20 bags of rice. So you're distributing 1 bag per local government. Yeah. The local government chairman and his council and councillors and administrators ought to know how many streets are in each local government, in their local government. Yeah. And each councillor is responsible for 1, 2, 3 number of streets, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 number of streets in his area. Does he know those streets? So he goes through the councillors down to the development associations, whatever it is, down. So you know everybody who gets what on the street. You know, if you have 5 streets, how many buildings do you have on each street? Yeah. And can we enumerate how many of them are vulnerable that requires part of this bag of rice? So it's easy. So if a local government has 10, 20 streets, then you know that you're distributing 1 bag of rice per 20 streets. So you just break it down to the last cup of rice. Yeah. It's simple in terms of distribution or in terms of cash. Yeah. But we don't have that. In the financial system, you have the banking sector with the BVN. So the central bank can say, the government says, look, take 1 billion naira and distribute it to every Nigerian that has a BVN. Yeah. Okay? Or, but again, that is another issue because Aliko Dangote has a BVN, and Tony Elumelu has a BVN, even the central bank governor himself, Godwin Emefiele, has a BVN. So if we are distributing, should we distribute to such individuals or to folks like me, or they say, oh, you're Boason, you're a TV show anchor and auto, you guys don't qualify. Maybe we'll give to the cameramen in the studios here or the drivers here at ProShare. You know, so we begin to decide, how do we decide the low-income people to distribute this money to? So how do we decide down the line those that need to have? So if you say, if you have savings account, maybe that will be the first threshold. Then you get it, say, well, Boason, you ought to have a current account, not a savings account. But again, we can see the flow through your bank. You don't qualify for this 5,000 naira. And I said, okay, fine, thank you. Give to my neighbor or the man across the street. So we don't have these measures. So even our statistics that we have does not include the basic statistics. So the MBS is doing quite a lot. But population, streets enumeration, house enumeration, all the key strategic data that a good and reliable population or census should do for us is missing. So the government, even at the federal, is hard put to say, if we want to distribute it, who should distribute it for us in a manner that will go round everyone. So we're locked in here between the government has good intention to do, but hold on a second, if you let the cat out of the bag, how are you sure? So it's going to become a subject of debate for quite a long time. If I have the answers right now, I would say let us do it this way. In other climes, the post office ought to be the best way to also do it, because everyone should have a postal address.
Yeah.
You don't need to receive letters. And I spoke with the former Postmaster General, the immediate past Postmaster General while he was in office before the latest round was done by Mr. President and putting someone in. And we had a lengthy conversation. Someone I know a bit farewell. And he says, look, the postal system can help you even fix the issue of financial inclusion and everything. Make sure that everyone, if you have a house, a building of 20 rooms, face me, I face you, that's 10 on the left and 10 rooms on the right. Let each person has a post office box. In other words, in that single building, you have 20, right? So if you're a bachelor or a spinster living in one room, you don't need to receive letter. Just assign a post office number to that person. That post office number goes into the security digital system.
Okay.
Right? With the postal number, you have critical data of that individual, his name, his birthday, his surname, mother's maiden name, and all of that. So you have the basic information of everyone. Yes. So with a postal system, you can say we have, out of 200 million, we have 180 million people in our postal address system. And you can use the postal address system to get across to that man and say, here's your 1,000 naira helicopter money from the government. This is your own 5,000 naira. So the postal system helps you to say, in this house, in this building, in Ajegunle, in Alagbadu, in Ikeja, there are 20 rooms at number 18, so street. In these 20 rooms, Mr. ABC lives in room number 5, right? This is his postal number. You can trace it. If it's not available there, if you go there even physically, you can come back because you know that's where he lives. Yeah. And you have other measure of tracing him. That you can also tie to a BVN number, whether you have money in that account or you don't have. So what we should learn again from this pandemic is that it is time to get our census back on, but we should do it as fast as yesterday. Yes. Our street addressing system, and make sure that everybody has a postal address by, may I use Nigeria parlance, by fire, by force. Make sure everybody has a postal system. You don't need to post letter, you don't need to receive packages, just have a postal system. Again, it's one major tool of security in the advanced world. It's a major security tool, postal address, to say where was the last location Otto or Boason's pension was sent to, where was the last address that we don't have it.
So we need to effect.
So the National Identity Card Program, NIMC, is good. But the postal system tracks you down to your village. It's attached to you till you die.
It's more inclusive.
It's a lot more inclusive. It's for the man, it's for the bottom of the pyramid to save us the mess of this sometime in the future.
No, like I asked Mr. Bimbola, the distributive system for people this period. We discussed about comparatively, like Wuhan. I know that he said Wuhan, China has a very robust authoritarian system. Lockdown for 76 days, things flowed. But in New York, London, and parts like Nigeria, it's been a challenge keeping people for a long time. They have to get things, distribution of food systems and all that. And like in Lagos, we have now food markets assigned from tomorrow in different vicinities where people can go in schools to get things. But how can we effect these distributive systems during this period to ensure that people, despite this lockdown, are not really feeling caught out in terms of supplies? Because if this lockdown is 14 days, we don't know. We'll come to that next step of what we should expect in terms of if we extend it or not. But on this particular matter, how should we approach it?
It's we've never been through this before, and I appreciate the assistance and planning that Lagos State, the federal government, and other state governments are putting in place, and all government agencies. We didn't have a template for this. The Ebola virus that came, we were fortunate enough, we were able to nip it in about too quickly before we got into this kind of situation. So that was good news for us back then. So right now we don't have a template for this to say, let's go and check the textbook, what it says on chapter this, paragraph that. So we don't have. So we need to now start thinking as the day goes by and try to manage the problems that has been existential with us. In other words, we have largely an unstructured economy and country. even though on the surface it looks like we have, but we don't really have a structure of a pyramid type, or if you turn the pyramid over, when the pyramid goes to the top and the tip end is down here, how do we, or what we call an inverted pyramid, how do we deal with it? So that means that we need to think as the day goes by and go as the spirit directs, and I think that's what we're doing now. We're trying to make the best of it. Yeah. I'm sure the authorities realize the ticking time bomb, if I will put it that way, the restlessness, let me put it a little bit more softer, the restlessness of the society and the people, especially the people at the bottom of the pyramid, where you have the largest concentration of the unemployed, largest concentration of school students who are at home, largest concentration of the informal people. If you have a fish farm, for example, and you have to sell the fish and all of that, now you have fishlings, right? Where do you get supplies to feed those little, the fingerlings or whatever you call them, to grow? So, which means if you can reach the market to get feedstock for the fish farm, for your fish farm, once you sold off what you have, those ones are either going to die off or whatever. So there's a restriction on your movement. So lockdown there has a problem. Where does he get it? So it's going to go into losses. It's borrowed money from Boason Microfinance Bank, whatever it is, church, whatever.
Hopes to do moratoriums at this period. Yeah.
So, now see, you can give people moratorium. Let's get it straight. Yeah. It does not, see, if you have an injury, you can put ointment on it. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that it's still the normal skin. Yeah. It means there's an injury that has to get healed. So you still carry injury. It's different from the normal course of life. So that's what we have to deal with. How do we ensure the distributive system? The agencies will have to trust that they will do the best for the people and in the interest of the people. And we will not, at the end of all of this, begin to sniff around and see the signature of some of the unsavory stories from the Northeast in distribution of food to the IDPs in the Northeast Nigeria under the Boko Haram insurgency. I hope at the end of this all, we'll not be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars or billions that have either disappeared into some person's account, people stealing the firewood that were to be used to cook for
the people.
For the IDPs. It's not as funny as it. I was in Borno State in Maiduguri for a couple of days.
We've been there too, and we could see the challenge.
And things that we heard were quite inhuman, that we Nigerians, some of us, very few of us, do to others under such pitiable situations. So we hope this rice and chicken and money, whatever, are not ending up, are not enriching, that we're not making millionaires out of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Making millionaires out of the people's challenge.
Out of the people's lockdown. I hope some folks are not becoming overnight multi-millionaires.
And for you, Mr. Boason, when we look at this same thing I've raised with Mr. Bimbola, the issue of the federal government having that task force to track the whole distribution process and donations, what we're expecting from them in terms of bringing that transparency that will inspire confidence in the country, and then the lockdown. I mean, we don't hope to be like the Wuhan case of 76 days, and even in UK, it's almost getting to May that they're going to have that lockdown. But if this is to extend, how can this be managed effectively that we don't have these cases you're seeing now, because we're seeing the restlessness already?
Some folks just sent some reactions on social media, on Twitter, and says, look, we should, there's not even electricity. So how do they follow the issues? How do they follow the news and all of that? So I see that the first is that folks want to follow the issues and what have you. Now, the amount that you spend on internet and data is getting a lot higher. People are beginning to talk more and to use data to get in touch with their loved ones and families that are not around. So folks go on WhatsApp videos and Zoom, whatever, Skype, whatever. And so we're spending more money on data. And that means whatever folks already have in their pockets, which ought to include the consumer goods, whatever is being spent on. So the guys smiling to the bank now are the internet data providers everywhere in the world. So, so that's how life is sometimes. But so we need to get this set, as I said yesterday, and I'm just repeating that now, sounding like a broken record, we need to use this opportunity to ramp up on those very critical areas of our lives and our economy that we had left largely not well attended. Electricity is one of it, or power, or energy, whatever you describe it. We need to fix that.
Yeah.
And this opportunity, this pandemic also shows that, yes, you want people to sit down at home, they won't be sitting in darkness and winking at each other. The devil finds work for idle hands. And you already have about millions of people in idleness or near idleness. So the devil is recruiting. And it's going to come and bite us at some point down the line. So we need to take care of that. Those who are in terms of distribution of what is being put together by others should remember that these are people's sweat. If they're coming from companies, they need to remember that there's no free money.
Yeah.
Some folks may think, oh, if XY Bank puts $1 billion on it, they have a lot of money there. The money...
Private organizations also donated too.
Look, even for public companies,
yes,
there are shareholders,
yes,
there are investors,
yeah,
there are other stakeholders. Yeah. These banks have whatever other obligations. So the $1 billion that GT Bank or Access Bank or Zenith Bank is putting on the table is no free money. No one should think that it's free money. Yeah. It's not free money. It's going to be accounted for.
It must be accounted.
They're going to pay dividend. They're going to pay staff salaries. They need to keep every system running, even under this lockdown. I mean, for the banks to start with. So folks should not think this is free money or $1 billion from Access Bank or GT Bank or UVA. Oh yeah, can we just have a pot of money? Let's just let it fritter away. This is our own cake. No, it's not a national cake. Nobody's building any national cake here. This is an emergency fund and should be used expeditiously, judiciously, and in a manner that can alleviate the current situation, but gives us a template to build a sustainable system of economic development that is, the backbone is industrialization moving forward. So where we are spending the money and distributing rice, chicken, and cooking oil, we need to understand that the key issue is that once this pandemic is over, in fact, the blueprint for our economic revival should be written under this wartime to be implemented moving forward. If we don't use that as the basis of conversation, I understand. Because again, our health workers are putting their lives and those of their families at risk, at hospitals and elsewhere. We need to write the blueprint of moving forward, of how we move forward in our healthcare system as part of the bigger picture. You know, there's a way we discuss economy, and we think it's all start and stop on Broad Street. No. Economy or healthcare, education, whatever, all is part of the economic discussion. So I think we should begin again to not just discuss the distribution of these donations and philanthropic efforts, whatever, but discuss the bigger picture of how do we rebound from this? What is the sound bites? We're borrowing money. And again, go back and read the statement from the World Bank the IMF chief, Christina Georgieva, and right there in the middle of paragraph 2, she's talked about not just the pandemic for Nigeria to fix it, but talks about Nigeria's balance of payments. I don't think most people miss that very little phrase in there. And it struck me that this money, $3.4 billion we're requesting from the IMF, is not just to fight the pandemic, but to help our balance of payments. In other words, our external reserves is dwindling. Our productivity is at a very low ebb. We're looking at the end of the barrel, or the short end of the carrot. Therefore, this money will have to be part of our balance of payment. And what is your balance of payments here? Everyone who has a little bit of sense of economics knows what that means. Our balance of payment, our current account is not in a good shape before this current pandemic. So right now, our back's against the wall. So we're going to be borrowing money, but to help us fix our balance of payments, which is your simple trial balance, between your credit side of your books and the debit side. Now, I've seen a few things, and I'm going to talk about this within the time you allow me here, that there's a time now to make more sacrifices on the side of the executive and the legislature. 3 days ago, I hinted about this. The story is that the Senate or whatever, some folks have said, look, they donate half of their salaries, or their salary for 50% of their salaries. I think, and I read what Atiku Abubakar, the PDP presidential candidate and a former vice president, wrote this morning, and I read it through before coming to the studios here, and I picked up a few nuggets from there. We can have a few countries in Africa in which they are submitting their entire salaries down, but again, we still want to buy executive luxury cars for the National Assembly. I think the National Assembly, that should be the first thing they should throw into the ring to say these hundreds of billions of these luxury cars that we initially planned to buy for year 2020 oversight functions, we will continue to use our 2019 vehicles. This money, please, executive branch, Mr. President, Muhammadu Buhari, can you take this money back? We're not buying those cars again. I think that should be the first thing that the National Assembly, both the Senate and the House of Reps, should do. Yeah. They should bring that first to the table. Then Nigerians will say, oh, that is good. Because that is a whole lot. Okay. Then the former vice president also mentioned a few things about how the government is also what is going to be used in the State House, I mean, at the villa for certain expenditure. We need to make certain sacrifices that go a long way. Not just beyond, because again, what's the average salary of someone in the, say 50% of that. So if you say it's a 15 million or 5 million per month, okay, I'll give 50% of that down. But hold on a second. You're buying this same individual a vehicle that costs about 25, 45 million naira. So he gives you half of his salary. So I give you half of my salary. My salary is 15 million. I surrender 7.5 million. But through the taxpayers' money, you're buying me a vehicle that is 50, 60 million naira.
So you should waive this.
So, hold on a second. What have I lost? So they have the salary is good. Thank you, gentlemen, at the National Assembly, at the legislature. But again, why don't you leave those vehicles for 2020 and say, look, this is a very tough situation we're in as a country. We can afford to let this multi-billion naira car project go, and a few other things. And say, look, for year 2020 also, we are also cutting back on the National Assembly budget. We want to revise it. If it's an average 150 billion naira every year, for the year 2020 to 2020 and 2021, in the short term, we're revising it down to 100, or a little below 100. Maybe just for symbolism's sake, I say we're going to do 90 or 95 billion, and we take off this. That will ring a lot of good bells, sort of music, in Nigeria's ears. And you expect folks across the 36 state House of Assemblies to do the same. I say, look, we are calling on the House of Assemblies across the 36 states and the FCT to also cut down on their expenditure. So we need to revisit budget 2020, not on the side of the executive only because of the oil price at the bottom of the barrel, but also on the side of the legislature, of which there's been so much hues and cries before COVID to do something. So 50% salary looks like good measure, but hold on a second, let them forgo the car, revisit their own budget. Because right now what you see in many African countries and elsewhere in the world, even in the corporate world, company executives are giving up their pay. Some are taking up their bonuses, some are calling back on dividends and a few other things to support the initiative. So we need a lot more. We've heard a little bit from the federal, but across the states, I think the House of Assembly should also step forward and say we're reducing our budget. Every state governor's house, budget of the state house, should also say, look, we spend 2 billion a month or 1 billion a month to run the state house in XY state. We're cutting it down to 500 million. Okay, we're cutting a few champagne out, a few weekend suya, whatever it is. We're taking our allowances, we're taking it down for 2020, 2021, so that at least whatever happened in 2020, by 2021, we can begin to say, this is where we are. We need a lot more. We are borrowing. So I'm reading a little bit from Atiku Abubakar's script. I'm not his apologist here or defending this, but I found a lot of sense in what he says. We can't be borrowing $7 billion. We have the previous 20-something billion dollars that's already there. But again, we haven't really seen serious cost-cutting measure from the inside. We need to do that. So you're borrowing on one side. First of all, reduce your expenditure. So what he wrote, Atiku Abubakar wrote, had to do with Nigeria, and it's also about African leaders, what we need. He says in this piece, we need to look at the budget we've done, we need to reassess, we need to rethink our expenditure for this year and moving forward. And I think we all need to take that on board, regardless of whoever is on left or right side of political divide. This is not about politics or ethnicism or nepotism. This is for everyone.
Inclusive.
We're in the same boat here.
Mr. Boason, in wrapping up, just in 1 minute, what would you be saying in this time in terms of hard decisions to have to?
Well, I think things are moving as we here discussing this, because I'm just getting some news on Twitter that the NNPC Group Managing Director, Amelia Carey, is announcing removal of fuel subsidy. I'm sure this is raising the game in terms of if fuel subsidy is removed, our petrol prices down to about 123 plus naira and a few kobo right now. If that is coming through, if the government is removing full subsidy at this point in time, because crude prices are around 32 thereabout and still a little bit volatile, still on the downside, where does that leave Nigerians and Nigerians? What are we waking up to after the lockdown? If fuel prices are down, if crude prices are up, does that mean we're going to go back to what price per liter moving forward? I think these are some of the conversations we need to be taking them up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boason Omofaye, for
pleasure.
the time, CEO of Frontier Africa
pleasure.
Reports. And that'll be all for this edition of the Nigeria Economic Discourse. Join us tomorrow once again by 10 a.m. for further discussion around the economy and COVID-19 pandemic. And you can also follow our Twitter handle at WebTV NG and other channels, YouTube. Till we come your way, thank you for watching and have a nice day. And also, stay safe.